Thank you for coming and showing up for government contracting with Ashley and myself, Natasha, at GovConHacks. I'm super excited to have you all here today. Welcome. If you have any questions, feel free to share. This is live and we're happy to answer as we go along. But I think today our primary conversation is going to be around mentor-protege, teaming, subcontracting, and meeting primes. And so that's where I will leave that and introduce Ashley.
Thank you very much. Yes, we've gotten a lot of questions lately, between just last week and this week, where the answer was pretty much all the same. So we figured, why not just do an episode on it and kind
Yeah.
of have time to go through a deeper explanation of, what even is teaming, the different ways there are to team, and the opportunities that exist, that tend to lead to faster money sometimes in some industries, by working with other companies collaboratively. So,
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. So I think that I'll start with what everyone usually reaches out to me for. Um, how do you team? How do you, collaborate with other companies? There is this common theme in businesses that we're all competition. And though, there is, right? It's healthy competition, but there's also collaborative. Teaming together, helping each other leverage each other's, core capabilities and helping each other essentially win a proposal and perform the work together. Um, what you lack, someone else might have significant leverage in. So having that concept of knowing that you can team and partner with other companies is super, super beneficial and imperative and important. And it helps you in this industry, in most industries, to be honest. But I have a lot of people that reach out to me to reach and see how they even can initiate those conversations. So for me, I always find that it's more beneficial versus the whole sending emails with my capability statement and introducing myself and not really getting a response. I always find that it's always better when you meet them at an event, networking. It is an oldie but a goodie, I would say. What do you think about that, Ashley?
I agree. Events are definitely a great way not only to meet government buyers and small business points of contact, and advocates and resources. I mean, I love the technology booths. I gotta say, I'm a nerd. But a great way to meet other businesses, right? That might complement your service
Yeah.
as well. And I know that we talked about, I think, on one episode already, the 8A conference that's coming up again here
Hmm.
in Atlanta. That was an amazing event where I literally watched teaming situations form at the table while we were eating, and
Yeah.
these conversations started. So, yes, but I understand that a lot of you joining us today may have never attended a conference before. Maybe you didn't plan for, um, in the budget to make it to 8A in February. I believe that if you didn't get early bird, that was 750 a person last year, if I'm not mistaken. So, we understand that some of you are new and maybe email is the only way that you have to outreach, but let's not forget, as most of us complain about how customer service is dead, let's not forget, pick up the phone and give them a call, right?
Yeah.
Um, most of the contact information, if not all, that you seek is public information. You just have to know where to look.
I would
So
agree.
I actually had a meeting today with an IT service provider, and experienced contractor, in fact, wanted to kind of get back to her core and what she wanted to do. When you start building these relationships, you kind of start to get pulled in different directions,
Yeah.
in some cases. So, they have some contracts with a couple of agencies, as a sub, but they really wanted to focus on the IT side of the business. And, I had to have the conversation of 9 out of every $10 is spent through a vehicle of some sort.
Yeah.
If you're in IT and you're a new small business, I mean, that's pretty much the only option there is for you to start out with is as a subcontractor.
Yeah.
You know, if they have a process, highly recommend following it before you ever make contact, I would say.
Mhm.
And, in my experience, not all primes are alike. Not all primes are going to have an area on their website to receive you. But 9 times out of 10, if they have a contract vehicle, their contact information is public. They have a vested interest, especially with subcontracting plans, to work with small businesses to meet their subcontracting goals.
Yep.
So it's just your responsibility to figure out which primes, because they're all not going to be interested in your stuff. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. So, I think it kind of goes back to that doing your market research. Um, it goes in the federal space and the commercial, in reaching your primes and your teamings and all that stuff that you want to see who's utilizing those NAICS codes. You want to see how much money they're making in those NAICS codes and if they've made money recently and if they are large, if they have any advantages. If you have any advantages, maybe you have a set aside that they don't, and they need to make, they're a large company and need to meet that set aside. There's a lot of ways that you can leverage yourself, but knowing who is doing what you do will help you get in the door, especially if they're larger and can utilize either a set aside or a care capability of any sort. Um, and introducing yourself, whether it's email, phone, networking, I think all three are really good components. Um, I sometimes like to go a little extra mile, small business liaisons, if it's a large enough company, right? If it's a large enough company, I'll go in LinkedIn and I'll look up who's your small business liaison and I'll contact that person so I could at least gear my information specifically to who I'm inclined to send it to. Um, if it's a smaller business, I'll try to see who's their business development person. Usually they're in the sales department, and you can usually play around their website and find that information. Or you can go on LinkedIn, follow the corporate, and then click on the people. Most employees follow their company's, page. So I'll kind of look at those people and their titles and see who I can gear my capabilities to sell my, services and kind of introduce myself. So all those are good ways to find a way around to get to the person that you need to speak to. It takes a little time, but before you know, you'll be doing it in your sleep. So,
Absolutely. We have a question. Kimberly, one of our community members, asked how to find these networking events. And I did post a link on our website on govconhacks.com/events. You'll find a lot of conferences, networking events, matchmakers, and we're subscribed to a gazillion publications to post those events, but it's impossible to catch them all, right? So some other places that you can look is Eventbrite. A lot of agencies have started posting their events on Eventbrite. Now, Eventbrite did recently start monetizing and making it harder to post free events. So I'm not sure if that's going to be consistent in 2024. However, you can always default to the agency's small business page. So what I do is I type into Google agency, we'll use Department of Defense, for example, Office of Small Business events. And typically in the top results, those will come up. They usually all manage an events page. The small business office does, or at the OSGBU level, depending on who you're targeting and how deep.
mhm.
But by default, if you can't find it, ask the small business liaison.
Yeah.
They're there to help you and kind of point you in the right direction. So
Yeah, and even to kind of second on that, a lot of companies do share the events that they will be at
yes,
on their websites. So when it comes to partnering, I like to look at events and usually they'll have a little section that says we are attending. And so I want to know where their booth is. I want to know who's going. I want to do my research. What IDIQs are they on? What contracts do they have? What are their core capabilities? And I want to be there in front of them to speak to them. So it helps to A, steal some of the events that they have already posted out there for you to see, and B, know where those people are going to be that you want to market to, outside of just federal agencies. So yeah, that's pretty helpful as well.
and one thing I can say to help you prepare, because back to that whole what to say thing, what do you lead off with? Your
Oof.
elevator pitch, guys. I
Yeah.
gotta say, there is so much power in a
No, I'm
good
an SDVOSP. What are you talking about?
Yeah, when you lead with your set asides, you're basically telling whoever's listening, hey, I see my value in my set asides. Lead with what you're good at and the results that you provide. Because sometimes set asides aren't enough. Anyone who qualifies can get through the process. But if I'm a prime contractor,
Mhm.
or a government agency for that matter, I'm looking for responsiveness and responsibility above all, right? So if you demonstrate to me in your elevator pitch that you have, in essence, done this before, if you are, say, a janitorial company, tally up all the square footage of all of your customers and all of the sites that you have cleaned in your business experience and kind of lump that into an elevator pitch, something that you're going to continue to work on, right? It never sticks the first time, but practice this so that you can tell someone under 30 seconds what it is that you do.
Yeah, and what best value you provide, not just I'm janitorial service, I'm SDVOSB. You want to provide numbers, you want to put out metrics, you want to show them
I
that
love
you've done this
metrics.
on a large scope and you've done it at best value and that you're competent and efficient and affordable. So if you can put that in a pitch, you pretty much said everything you need to say in one statement.
And there's definitely a way to do that. And, depending on who you're talking to, right? This kind of goes back to planning. If you're going to spend the time, resources, and money to attend some of these conferences,
Yeah.
guys, don't just show up blind. Do your homework, find out who else is going to be there. Like Natasha said, I see a lot of that on LinkedIn. We're
Mhm.
attending. A lot of times the speakers announce we're speaking. Make sure that you're in the right rooms and that you plan to meet with everybody that you have an intention of meeting with. Sometimes there's matchmakers, sometimes there's not. It really kind of depends on the event. But a lot of clients have kind of targeted the events with the matchmakers specifically
Yeah.
for that reason because they want to talk to as many people as possible.
Mhm.
But definitely make sure that you are armed with your business card.
Yes. Or
Lots
your
of
hi
them.
hello or your electronic cards. I saw that was
Or
a
your
really
dot
big,
card. Yeah.
yeah, I found that was a really big one as well. Along with that, go into the exhibitor staff sites of these different events and you can pull up the map of all the people that have registered with a booth. And so you can usually kind of see where they're going to be stationed. You'll have a map of where everyone is, and you can kind of set up an execution plan. It's a little more of the BD segment of it, but kind of planning each department, federal and commercial, because they all share. So, you'll have some primes, you'll have some subcontractors there, you have some consultants there, and you'll have a lot of people that you can kind of like meet. So you can make that event as beneficial as possible by kind of like seeing 2 to 3 or 4 or 5, companies all together. Along with that, I think it should be said that it doesn't have to just be government events. I find that a lot of Chamber of Commerce events are bringing in that component, most importantly for SLED, but they also help with a little bit of the federal portion of it. But there are a lot of components now that they're bringing in to kind of market the county, the state, opportunities that are out there and how to best do business with them. And they have little separate, sections just for that. And people there are trying to market, they're trying to, team up and they're all new businesses in your area. So it's not a bad idea to get with your Chamber of Commerce and show up for networking events.
I definitely agree. And considering, let's talk about that for a moment, the local market.
Yeah.
In GovCon, and I believe it was my friend Judy Bratt who started using the term competimates. That's what we are. We might be, similar in our
Yeah.
services or scope, but maybe someone brings some experience to the table that's outside of what your experience has been, and vice versa. So this is intel that you don't really get to learn until you have a human conversation with someone. So if all you're doing is emailing and it's going into dead air and you're not actually having conversations, whether that's going to an event, whether that's attending a capability briefing, whether that's a virtual event, whether that's picking up the phone, start having the conversations. If you don't understand your customers' needs, it becomes very difficult to provide a solution when it comes time for the solicitation, right?
Correct.
But pretty much everything you do all starts with the market research because there's only so much time in one day. There's only so many resources. So if I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to plan the agency events I'm going to attend in 2024, it's going to be based on the data and who buys what I sell.
Yes. Yes. And I want to kind of jump on that as well. I think a lot of people email because it's safer and they can check off the box and say, I reached out. Because we have this fear of rejection as humans. So in sales, a lot of people are very quick to send an email, put their best foot forward, and then kind of leave it at that. And if they don't get any contacts or any, anything in regards to that, they did their best, right? Or follow up with another email. A lot of people are terrified to follow up with a phone call, or to show up face to face. And so that also should be discussed as well. I mean, we're all the same. Contracting officers, federal agents, everyone's the same. Your primes, your BD people, we all share the same feelings, the same worries, the same concerns. They're probably scared of meeting you the same way you're scared of me. They had a bad day. We're all people. People like people that are personable. So you can have a niche. You could be the best janitor that you ever wanted to be, and you want to start this business. Well, now you're not a janitor no more. Now you're a salesperson. And so you have to be likable, you have to be personable, and you have to be approachable. And you have to be willing to put your foot forward because you believe in your business. And no one's going to fight you for your business the way you do. So you have to be willing to step outside of your normal and get uncomfortable and make those connections, no matter how scary it may be.
I agree, I gotta say, and I'm an introvert, as we all know, so I don't typically like the crowds. By the time 4 or 5 o'clock comes and I'm at a conference, like I'm ready to go back to the hotel room and retreat.
Yeah.
Um, I champion, like I'm so thrilled for those of you who can then take it elsewhere and continue the party, but I'm spent. But I still will not go to sleep without
Yeah.
making sure that I've sent follow-up emails to those people that I've spoken with and keep the conversation going. And if you remember just one thing, always remember to never hang up or disengage without a next step, right?
Yeah.
There always should be a next step to keep that conversation moving. And let's say that the first time that you reach out to a small business liaison or a prime contractor happens to be by email because you have questions that you need answers to. Particularly speaking to the small business liaison officers, they expect those questions, right? And reaching out to them and asking specific questions to fill in gaps for you, to make sure that you can either qualify an opportunity or rule it out or identify, when this might drop or what's the status on that. They're very super helpful in just answering those questions. And oftentimes it can be a great way to start a relationship and then, end up receiving warm introductions when the time is right. What you don't want to do is you don't need to email spam the contracting officer talking about, I'm a veteran owned business or I'm a woman owned business and here's my capability statement. And then coming to Natasha and myself and saying, why won't they buy from me? Well, because that's not their job, right? That's not to receive you as a small business is not their role in the procurement process.
And
Um,
they've got 900 of those emails.
yeah, so they're either, if they're even answering them, they're probably forwarding to the liaison. I've had a couple, who were kind and warm introduced, I've heard. But typically, when my clients reach out to a contracting officer, it's because it came from a warm introduction from someone who said, this is who can answer that question, right? So, knowing the different roles of the different humans in government will definitely help guide you in knowing who's the right person to address this, who's the right person do I reach out for this. And I definitely recommend doing some education just on what the expectations are, what their roles are. And you might be surprised what you might learn. This whole time you've been reaching out to the CO, trying to pound his inbox, wondering why you've sent 25 emails and you haven't gotten a response. Well, they're not your end user. You should have been reaching out to the program manager.
Yeah. You're knocking down the wrong door.
Yeah, you're definitely knocking on the wrong door. So, there's a time for
Yeah.
each of your avatars, if you will, in government contracting, and reaching out and starting to build that relationship. When most people think, how do I build they ask, how do we build a relationship with a contracting officer? And it's kind of a perception of like tunnel vision, because what you need is not necessarily the relationship with the decision maker. You need to understand the agency,
Right.
talk to all of the people in the agency. What are
Right.
your pain points? What are your pain points? So put your project management hat on and identify your stakeholders. Who's actually using this product or this software or this service? If you can find out what that end user would change if given the chance about, the current way that that is being offered, you are in. You
Yes.
have now intel that you can use to make sure that your proposal speaks immediately to those pain points. And you're probably not going to find those pain points in the solicitation.
No. At that point, it's too late. And you want to
Yes,
be able to have an answer for it. So, that goes back to being, your market research and being preemptive and being there before the solicitation drops. And if you have those relationships already built, you will find that contracting officers will share that information prior and ask for suggestions. That's kind of where that RFI and those source of salts come from, looking for market research to help them formulate those solicitations. So those are the prime times to have those conversations and build those relationships. Um, but even more so, I think to kind of get back to the teaming portion and mentor-protege and all that, I also want to, tell people that though I want us all to get along, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're not compatible. And I truly believe that you should date before you get married. So before you sign any agreements, maybe do some research, research their CPAR ratings, research if they've done any business, anybody can say anything. Be conscientious of who you're going to be doing business with, because there's many of times I find that people get into business and didn't sign a teaming agreement or a subcontracting plan. And now your past performance was utilized and you did all this work and then you were kept out of you know, the contract.
I have heard that so many times, unfortunately. And um, making sure that you just know enough to and have boundaries. Having boundaries is good as a business owner, right? And sometimes we're not aware of the situations that occur until we face them and maybe it's too late.
Yeah.
um
But
I
it's super,
def
super important to just conscientiously prepare yourself and know that read through the fine print of your teaming agreement. Make sure that you're putting the pricing in that the prime is not controlling all of the pricing, making sure that you two have a really good relationship, because your relationship based on how you go through this proposal is the relationship of how you're going to work together in this contract. And remember, most of these are 2 to 5 year contracts. So you're going to be with each other for a long time. So you want to like each other. You want to be able to have somewhat management's like styles, have, close deliverables, a good communication plan. What does that look like? How are you two going to work together? As you're building a proposal, you're also building a plan of how the two of you are going to collaborate. So I think that's all super important, making sure that you have solid agreements in place and that there's no misunderstandings. Um, but along with that, just putting in a little for risk just in case. Because sometimes subcontractors, vendors, primes, sometimes it falls through and you have to, you have 30 days to find yourself someone else. And sometimes their pricing can be different. So putting a little risk is always important. That's why pricing and being strategic and be very, very conscientious of risk is super important, especially if you're a small business. The hit for, Booz Allen versus, John and Jane is two totally different
Drops
hits,
in a bucket. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
And think through these things, and it's an expectation. So where I would be concerned as a small business is if a prime contacted me asking me to do the work, wanted a quote for the work, and then and this is a real story, not didn't happen to me, but it happened to someone I know, wanted these questions answered. Basically, what they were questions out of the proposal.
Oh,
And so my client's basically in a position where there's no agreement. You're asking me already to do work, which is, answer the questions that you're going to use in the proposal. You haven't, you've taken my quote. So I've spent time on that now, and there's still no guarantee that I'm getting the job. Like, that's not normally how it goes. So
yeah.
protect yourself and know that anybody serious that wants to team with you will present you with a teaming agreement
Yes.
before any work takes place.
Yes.
And in many cases, and luckily all the cases that I've encountered so far personally, give you the opportunity to redline or make changes,
Yes.
before it's final. Now, keeping in mind that most of the time that does come in the form of a boilerplate template that's like, whoa, wait a minute, right? But they
Yeah.
typically give you that, expecting that you're going to redline it. So if you just sign away and you don't read the details, you could end up signing into a 5-year exclusive agreement, and if you're, I'm going to default on IT because that's literally, IT has been the industry of the day. But if I'm a small business IT contractor and I'm going after soup and I receive an exclusive teaming agreement that says for the duration of soup, I can't work on any other teams,
Yep.
what else am I going to do for the next 5 or, oh, I don't know, 10 years, depending on how many option years the government exercises? So don't become exclusive with anyone. That is an opportunity to negotiate, though. You might say, I am willing to avoid this particular scope of work on this particular um, contract. I mean, there are some negotiating factors that you can use there, but never become, ironclad exclusive, because that just limits your revenues. And a lot of the primes that I've encountered, when approaching for teaming agreements, at first it's in their boilerplate, but they are willing to negotiate away from it. So don't ever just walk away from it either without attempting to negotiate.
Yes, absolutely. And I will second on that and say that another way to protect yourself is know your elected officials.
Yes, good
Get
one.
in good with them. Um, Make sure that you have a relationship with them. They know that you exist, you're a small business, donate, be part of the voting process. It's really important because they're going to be the ones that fight for you should you need it. Should there be a point in time, which this happens a lot too, you don't get paid. A lot of people pay that you don't get paid until I get paid approach. Or I got paid, but my profit margins were hit real hard. So now I'm going to squeeze my, subcontractor. So that you can fight for yourself. Sometimes you don't know that you have rights, that there's regulations, and that's illegal not to pay you. So you have to be able to fight for yourself. And in order to do that, you should have yourself leveraged in a capacity where elected officials you can reach out to and say, hey, listen, this is what's being done to me. How can you help? And that is their job. So, and nobody wants an investigation. It will put you at risk on your contracts. So they will pay. If they're required to pay, they will pay. So it's super important to kind of just make sure that you have everything and everyone that you need on your side.
Yeah, definitely know who your advocates are. In addition to elected officials, like, let's not forget the PCRs,
Yeah.
the procurement center representatives. I know that our SBA PCRs have been insanely helpful, just in giving me industry clarity. How does this industry work? How does that industry work? And they take the time to explain it. Now, of course, we're all human. We're not all created equal. We all have busy schedules. So you don't want to take advantage, of course, of any one person, but know who your advocates are in your area and what their roles are. Same with your government uh, procurement personnel, know their roles. We will actually probably have a full course on this before the end of the year, and kind of breaking out, who does what in the government, and, how you can utilize and leverage those resources as a small business.
Yeah.
Um, and let's not forget, so usually the subcontracting is like the dating, right? I'll use that analogy. It's so funny you mentioned that because I use that all the time, like all the time when talking about joint ventures and mentor-protege agreements. So these are other two versions of teaming
Yeah.
that essentially can be leveraged, I would recommend after you've dated for a while, right? So you're a subcontractor, you're working for a prime, and depending on what small business set asides or certifications you have, sometimes the large company might be the prime and you might be the sub, and sometimes you might be the prime. Because don't forget, large businesses do not have access to the small business set aside contracts unless they subcontract for a small, right? So a lot of them are open to mentor protege agreements where if you're a very small company and you have a skill set that's in demand and utilized, I have had subject matter experts come to me who are just one person working as themselves, under their own single member LLC, who get into these mentor protege agreements and just they blow up.
Hmm.
And all the while, they're utilizing the resources of the prime, the
Right.
proposal team. So it becomes less burdensome because you now have this team that you otherwise wouldn't have had if you were on your own. So you're able to bid on more opportunities and consider more avenues that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to consider before.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And the SBA isn't the only agency that has a mentor protege program. The DoD also has one. If I'm not mistaken, even NASA has one. I had a list at one point. Perhaps I will throw that in the community.
Okay.
I will dig that up. And Department of Homeland Security does
Yeah.
have one as well. So, depending on who buys what you sell, again, going back to market research, those programs and working towards those programs with a prime could really lead to long-term sustainable revenue for you.
Yeah, and I think it's also good to say that not just as a small business, but as you grow, a lot of people hit that point where they start winning contracts.
Mhm.
Then it's about scalability, it's about growth, it's about operations, it's about accounting and HR, and how does you pivot your business development and your niches and something that a bigger company can provide you and help you, all the lessons that they've learned through all the hardships they've endured, really is essential in your growth. So it's so much more than just winning contracts, but it's also about sustaining them and being profitable. And that's also what those programs provide. Super good.
Absolutely. So definitely, if you are not a member of our community, find us on Facebook, facebook.com/groups/, GovConHacks. Um, Drop your questions in the group, submit them via the form. We will have more conversations and carry on inside the group on teaming and subcontracting. So we are out of time for today, but it's been great. Thanks, Natasha.
Thank you, Ashley. You had a great time, and I'll see you next week.
I'll see you next week. Bye bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye, guys.